Go now.
We can go now. Good morning. The Committee on Ways and Means will come to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll for attendance?
Commissioner Scott?
Present.
Commissioner Baker McCormick is excused. Commissioner Marecki is excused. Commissioner Baydoun?
Here.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Vice Chair Palomera?
Here.
You have a quorum present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk,
Chairman's remarks.
I have no remarks. Next item.
Approval of the minutes of the September 24th, 2019 meeting.
Moved by Commissioner Anderson, supported by Commissioner Scott, to approve the minutes from the September 24th meeting. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Madam Clerk,
Unfinished business, there is none.
next item.
Item E1, requesting Commission approval of the 2019 apportionment report in accordance with Sections 34 and 37 of the General Property Tax Law.
Considered read. Scott, are you going to join us this morning?
How are you? Good. How you doing, buddy?
Thank you. And the reason why we're meeting today is to fulfill this requirement.
Good morning. Scott Van Emergel, Director of Assessment and Equalization for Wayne County. Thanks for having me here this morning. Yes, the apportionment report are actually which will be the County Commission meeting in its annual apportionment session to give the directive to for the apportionment order. More specifically, is one of the two assessment and equalization and tax related responsibilities of the County Commission, which happens annually. Earlier in the year, the earlier responsibility of the Commission is the equalization of assessments on the valuation side, and then on the taxation or tax rate side in the fall. Now, the Commission needs to actually take the tax rates that have been prepared by the local municipalities and taxing entities, and then spread those tax rates upon the values to perfect the tax lien. And that process is called tax rate apportionment. The direction by the Commission of the spread of those tax rates upon the valuations, and then that perfects the tax lien and gives legal standing to the tax bill or tax rate, if you will, essentially sticking to the property as a valid tax lien. And that's what this process entails. So not only is it just a receive and file report, but there actually is an action. There's a formal directive, an apportionment order or directive from the Commission that directs that the rates are spread upon the taxable values. So it's an actual formal order from the Commission itself. So there is a distinction in the resolution to not just receive and file, but the wording in the resolution that I prepared has specific verbiage that's in accordance with the statute that says that there are certain things that are happening past just taking the report in.
Very good. Any questions? Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Scott. Are there any issues that we have that similar to last year? Do you remember we had I think a downriver community that had seemed like was the only outstanding issue, the complaint, whatever?
Every year, because it's a very dynamic place, a lot of parcels, a lot of units, a lot of different things that can occur. One issue that has been brought forth earlier in the season is relating to the Headley amendment, the Headley reduction of tax rates. And without going into a whole big dissertation on the technicalities of it, every year the tax rates are required to be reduced or rolled back, Headley rollback, and that's part of a constitutional provision to keep tax bill or tax revenue growth constrained to the rate of inflation. So if the taxable values go up too high, it's kind of like a seesaw. Taxable values go up too high, the tax rate pushes on the seesaw and proportionately is reduced mathematically via a Headley reduction. There's somewhat of a contentious issue on some verbiage that was in a ballot issue for one of the taxing entities that's in discussion right now.
Okay. The only other thing I would ask is that if our fiscal person has, Mr. Abbo, if you have any comments on it or any concerns, also our legal counsel.
Any issue that I had has been addressed. I'm good with the document and would recommend approval.
Okay.
Commissioner Baydoun.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got to get used to saying you, Mr. Chair. I will move for approval, but I have a question. Do we need a second?
Support.
Thank you. Scott, I have a question. We may have touched on this before in one of our other meetings. What's the increase in assessment or generated taxes this year over the year prior? I know we lost a lot of revenues when the market crashed, and we have seen an increase in property value. I'm just trying I know we have it somewhere in our office, but just out of curiosity, how much more taxes are we collecting this year versus the year prior? If you know that answer.
I think I did the analysis with and without the city of Detroit being included. I think it was, forgive me if I'm off, but I think it was for some reason 4.26% with Detroit increase in taxable values in the aggregate, and 4.41% without, or vice versa. Call it 4.25% to 4.5% overall. And it actually did outpace inflation, which was 2.4%.
Yes.
Our county millage was not rolled back, by the way. And the reason why it was not rolled back is because we actually had development activity, and that is a permissible reason for an increase in your tax base past the rate of inflation. So it can grow past inflation, but it can only grow because of development activity.
And to that point, our millage rate in the county has not been increased in 10 years, from what my understanding?
Well, it can be increased only by vote of the people.
Yeah.
It can always go down.
Yeah.
But it can only go up, of course, by the vote of the people. But no, it hasn't changed in 10 years, to answer your question.
To that point, Mr. Abbo.
Yeah, and through the chair, Commissioner, I believe the number, Scott is right on the percentage. I thought it was about 4.1%, 4.2 sounds correct. But against a $40 billion taxable value, it comes to about $16-17 million, which has been incorporated into our budget, which was just recently approved.
Yeah, I knew it was there, but I just
Yeah, it's significant because we're still recovering from the huge reduction that we took back in 2009 when we went through the recession. We still haven't recovered from that.
which we lost about 100 million.
I think we lost about 300 million.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, just in super gross terms, we had, 10 years ago-ish, when we were at our peak, we had something like $60 billion in valuation, and then we went down for our assessed value. We went down to something like $40 billion more recently. Our taxable value, I think, went from 54 billion, and I think right now it's, like Mark said, it's something like 40-ish billion. So, I mean, we were decimated for our taxable value. It's come back somewhat, but I mean, I think we're only running at something like 78% of where we were at our, I think it was 2007 or 2008 peak. Where we were, and that was almost 10 or 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And of course there have been inflationary increases in erosion of purchasing power in the meantime.
It was interesting because at the time that the reduction occurred, there was always speculation about how long it would take for local jurisdictions to recover, and the estimate was always 25 years, and that actually is coming to fruition. It is taking that long because the Headley amendment kicks in. It does not limit the reduction.
Yeah, limits the increase.
But when it starts going up, there are limitations.
And the Headley Amendment is, much to everyone's consternation, well intended. It was very effective. I mean, maybe too effective, one could argue, but it was very effective at limiting revenue growth. I mean, it did exactly what it was intended to do, and then some. But to a fault, in the sense that when no one ever anticipated the real estate values could not only go down, but go down so substantially, and then mathematically, once things were pushed down, that they would stay down. And I don't think anyone ever envisioned that was a potential fallout.
Yeah, when Proposal A was passed in 1994, nobody anticipated the market to go down the other direction.
Right. For certainly not that much.
Yeah, thank you, and forgive me, but Commission Counsel to Commissioner Anderson's earlier point, please.
Good morning through the chair. With regards to this matter, I don't have a lot of information, Commissioner. I was generally told that there was a community that included something, I think, on a ballot with regards to their millage rates or something to that effect. But I don't have enough information and didn't realize this was an issue today to offer you any type of comment at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Abel?
And the matter that Felicia is referring to was Schoolcraft College was putting forward Headley override, and when the millage was approved, they had an extension of a sentence which said the rate shall be assessed through 2028 without further reduction to Section 31 of Article 9 State Constitution of 1963, which basically saying that they are not subject to further Headley override. Our Assessment and Equalization Department has taken a differing point of view on that, as has Oakland County and Washtenaw County. And our millage rate has to be consistent, and the application of the law has to be consistent with Washtenaw and Oakland County. Although there is revenue for redress by Schoolcraft if they do not agree with us, and they can take it to the tax tribunal to get the assessment increased to be consistent with their millage language. We don't believe our assessment and equalization, and nor does our Corporation Council believe that they do believe that Headley still applies to the millage rates at Schoolcraft College.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
Mark, what happens in other cases, though, where there's a Headley override? Do we treat those all the same?
This is what Schoolcraft is saying, that this is a permanent Headley override for 10 years, and that's what we're taking issue with. They can override Headley, but it applies only for that tax year, and then they are in later years they are subject to Headley again. So it brings the tax rate up, and then it continues to drop again as Headley is applied to the millage rate. What Schoolcraft is saying is we took it up and it stays up for 10 years, and we're saying no, that's inconsistent with what we believe the state constitution says, and if you disagree with us, go to the tax tribunal, argue your case, and let them decide.
So we've done that in previous years with all Headley amendments, because they're never for 1 year. They're usually...
I believe that they are just for 1 year.
Are they?
I can never answer a question with a yes or an answer, but I apologize. But it's just not like that. They're typically, a Headley override is typically for multiple years. So it's as close as I can come to a yes or no answer. What's happening here is the millage is at a certain level. It's always, there's an original authorization for a millage rate, and then over time with this seesaw effect and this mathematical compensation effect, the pressure on the seesaw, if you will, the Headley millage reduction fraction, subsequent rollbacks or subsequent erosion to the tax rate over time take the rate from here to here and push the rate down over time. So the county's original millage, by way of example, it was 6.07 mils, and now it's at about 5.5 mils over time, over the course of many years since 1981, since the charter became the charter. In this instant case for Schoolcraft, their millage was, I think, about 1.7, and they wanted to take it back up, the voters, and the voters approved it, to take it back from 1.7 to its original authorization of about 2.2 mils. So it's about a half mil more. So the voters said, yes, please take us back to where we were, please tax us more. We're okay with that, and do that for 10 years. Where the contention comes is a normal Headley override is to allow for a limited amount of time, which can be up to 20 years, and to take that the millage rate back up to where it was, but then Headley is always there sort of in the background, and everything is always subject to the Constitution and always subject to the amendments, which is one of which is Headley, so that although the rate goes back to where it was, it normally would then be subject to this rollback fraction, even where it was when it was quote-unquote restored back to where it was would still be subject to this incremental erosion once again, even though it was taken, it was just now taken right back up to where it was. There was sort of this novel, if you will, language that was inserted into the ballot that is of arguable legal standing, that said without further reduction, as Mark said. That is what's in contention by legal counsel for the school, and whether that's argued one way or the other successfully is probably for the court to decide if they should choose to pursue it. So that's what's at hand here is the Headley override process goes on everywhere in the state, and it's been going on since 1978, where voters periodically vote to up tax themselves. But this, without further reduction, is kind of a novel idea.
So you're saying this is different
Right.
than the previous ones that have been for multiple years?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And what's being asked to be done here is for us to sort of be the first to accept this novel interpretation and to go, go out on a limb, if you will, and to take sort of a very broad, differing interpretation of things in favor of the school. And not that I think that anyone doesn't, yield to the will of the people and love the college students at Schoolcraft and, give substantial deference to the voters. In matters of tax law interpretation and the way that we administer the office, I think that we run a very judiciously conservative office. We don't like to be trendsetters. We don't like to diverge from the rules and regulations. We try to keep it right between the lines.
Right.
And if anyone is going to do that, I believe it should be the court of competent jurisdiction, which would be the tax tribunal, as Mark said.
Right. Okay.
So Scott, now I'm confused.
Sorry. I tried to hold myself back.
When the override goes into effect for a certain year, isn't it not subject to Headley reduction the following year?
It is subject to.
Okay, so that's what I was referring to. You're saying that when it covers many years, so you're saying if Headley, there's a tax millage rate, let's say, in effect for 2015, and for 2016, 17, 18, it's been reduced, you can restore it back to the 2015, and that's the multiple years that you're talking about. But once it's restored, let's say in 2020, in 2021, it is now subject to reduction for Headley.
It's subject to that quote-unquote re-erosion process,
Exactly.
if you will, because to the extent that it means constitutional, still the Constitution, the provision, the Headley override is the initial restoration. And there's still always in the background that provision of the Constitution that says, wait a minute, you can't let your revenue growth exceed inflation, even though the voters permissively took the authorization back up.
Okay, we're good.
Cheryl, would Corp Counsel like to add to this ball of confusion? You don't have to.
Well, I just want to say everything Scott said was correct. Drew's been working very closely with him. They informed me of it. And so, yeah, the action that Scott is recommending, we believe is correct. And also what Mr. Ebo said, which is if they really have a problem, they can go to the tax tribunal, let them decide. And frankly, if the tax tribunal says they can do that, then we might think about doing it too. but
Okay.
but
Exactly.
that's fine where it is. Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think we were saying that half kiddingly that, we don't really necessarily want to stand in Schoolcraft's way and or nullify the will of the voters, but we also don't want to be trendsetters in tax interpretation and get ourselves in a lot of trouble either. So we want to take a very careful
Proceed with
tack,
caution.
of course.
Yeah.
But like Cheryl said, our millage has been rolled back a half mil at times, $40-some billion in taxable value is an awful lot of money. If there's, be careful what we advocate for, but if they're successful in this novel interpretation, this will create a ripple all over the state, and which would potentially benefit us. Not that I'm advocating for their position, but we have our own advocacy for what we need to do, but we're also not going to stand in the way of their appeal either, if that should be what they choose to pursue.
Okay. Commissioner Scott? You're all set?
I'm all set.
Good.
I think I
Yes,
understand.
Scott, go ahead.
One last thing, and this is kind of an unusual matter, and it's kind of unprecedented, and it may be an extravaganza, it may not be. They preserve the right of further appeal or invoke the jurisdiction of the Michigan Tax Tribunal by potentially going to the full board and either saying, I appeal, and then sitting back down, or if Chair Bell opens things up for a public hearing, which we haven't really given formal wording to in the past, in quite those words, or they could go into a whole dissertation about why they think this is unjust and why they believe their position is right. As you know, our department has no real legal authority to do anything. All we do is make recommendations to you as the governing board. And they will then offer their probably differing position on what they believe their recommendation to the governing board should be for its apportionment order recommendation. At the full board meeting, when this whatever goes on, that will be it's much like the local level board of review for assessment appeals, for valuation appeals. This is, the analogy would be, this is the same thing, but now we're not appealing valuations, we're appealing millage reductions and tax rates. So it's the same but different.
Thank you, Mr. Vandermergel. Any further discussion? A motion is in order. Sam? Make the motion.
And I supported it.
And it's been supported to approve the apportionment report as submitted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk?
Item F, such other matters as may properly be submitted before the committee.
Any other matters? Any other matters? Madam Clerk?
Item G, public comment.
Anyone from the public here to comment this morning? Hearing and seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Adjournment.
Moved by Commissioner Scott, supported by Commissioner Anderson to adjourn, so ordered without objection. We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody, for coming in. See you in a little bit.
Oh, you, Scott?
Good.